Hi, all, Mark here with the Exiles. Hope you're well. Tradition, so weather first. It's a lovely spring day. Feels like summer is finally on its way, which is great. So tick for everybody that says I always talk about the weather first. Today in this short video we're going to talk about Posta de Finestra instabile. Okay, I'll throw an image on the screen and I'll also use my copy of the manuscript here. We have videos on this. We have videos on this in workshops being used. We also have Jason's poster notes, but I've been asked a couple of questions about using this poster, and so we're going to cover some of that today. Quick caveat, the local farmer is up and down this field shooting stuff. He said when he goes past he will beep his horn so that I can stop the video and he can drive past, but you might hear gunshots and I might have to stop this video a fair few times because he's racing up and down this field shooting stuff. Anyway, so Posta de Finestra. So we find the poster like this, okay? So hopefully I'm far enough back where you can see. Weight is on the rear leg. Front leg is toes up, not a lot of weight on that, and if you want to, this is preference, you can have that a little bit offline as well. Bend in the rear foot, rear toes facing generally off in this sort of direction, so if I'm looking over my right shoulder, this would be off at about 45-degree angle, and then the weapon is placed at pretty much eye level. If you look at the picture in the Getty, his eyes are just ever so slightly underneath the blade so that you can see them. And the cross guard is behind the eye level too. It's behind eye level too, and it's like this. To maintain this posture, it's probably easier if you use a cup type grip on the pommel, because it just allows you just to relax your grip a little bit and make it comfortable, and there's nothing to say you can't secure that grip again as you start to employ the weapon and move it forward. If your preference is to grip a weapon like this with a sort of closed grip, it can be a little bit more uncomfortable, okay, but I mean, again, all of this is choice and preference. So in terms of the posture itself, it's described as instabile, okay? It's an unstable posture. Now remember, as I've said in previous videos, lots and lots, instabile is as much about the position itself as it is about how you use it, okay? So the reason why it's unstable, it's an instabile posture, is because it's not locked to my core, and it's very easy to put aside the points of this weapon, okay? And on that basis, that's also needs to be taken into account with how I use this posture too. So we're given quite a lot of information about this posture, so let's cover it now, okay? So where I say in terms of instabile, it's as much about how you use it as the position itself. This is not a position where you're going to maintain a particularly strong cover. Aside from the fact that the weapon is starting to drift behind you, so you're cutting down on distance, okay? So in itself, you're not really expected to maintain this position, okay? Also, it's not covering very much, okay? If someone fendentes down this line, not that they would, because my weapon is already on that line, but if they did, I'd have to start lifting the sword up or moving it out to make some sort of cover, and that starts to compromise my effectiveness. Yeah, I'm starting to take myself out of position when there's other much cleverer things I can do. That being said, you can transition into this posture in a very quick way, which will give you a cover, okay? So if someone's fendenting to my right from their left, I can just employ this tip across as a very quick cover to clear a line to then thrust down. So there's a couple of exceptions. With regards to how it's used, so we're told things like you can transition to lots of other different postures very quickly. We're told things like obviously it's great for being deceitful, and it's also obviously good for thrusting because, you know, your points are already on. So with that in mind, there's a whole bunch of different ways to use this particular position, okay? What I'm effectively doing, as should be pretty obvious, is I'm basically just always lining up a thrust with it, okay? So from here, I've got lazy high thrusts. I've got thrusts where I can gain a lot of distance by untwisting my arms. I'm always having that point there to basically threaten my opponent. Although, if my opponent sees me in this posture, they have to be a complete idiot to ignore the fact that I've got the thrust on, okay? Which means, if I'm using that thrust as an opening attack, it's probably going to be intercepted. It's probably not going to land, okay? Unless the person in front of me has absolutely no experience whatsoever. No one in their right mind is going to just let me drift forward and send a thrust in from that position, okay? Not as an initial attack, at least. So, going back to the instabile element, I have to build that in to how I'm using this position and what I'm doing from it, okay? So, in a nutshell, I'm always going to anticipate the fact that my opponent can put aside the point of my weapon. So if I'm the person that wants to initiate the attack with a thrust, I'm pretty much always going to be anticipating the fact that my opponent is going to put that thrust aside. Okay, and that therein is the instabile aspect of this position. Okay, it's unstable. So as I'm thrusting and they're putting that aside, I'm basically relying on that principle to set myself up for a follow-on action. Mr. Farmer did in fact beep. Okay, so where were we? So yes, I'm basically relying on the fact that because it's an instabile position and the actions from it are generally instabile, my opponent's probably going to put the point aside. So I build that into how I use it, right? So if I'm here, I'm drifting or whatever, I'll quite often thrust on the basis that it's going to be put aside and I can just roll that attack into another attack, okay? So I'm working on the premise that that thrust is not going to land. What else are we told? So we're also told that this is good for breaking thrusts as well. So, and that is pretty self-explanatory. So from here, okay, if my opponent is thrusting low, then trigonometry basically dictates that I just thrust high and I'll probably hit them, okay? So we're not really dealing with a low thrust, okay? What we're dealing with is a mid-range to high thrust, unless they have a longer weapon. So when I'm breaking thrusts from Finestra, I'm not necessarily thinking about it in the same way that I would with the plays of the manuscript where he's breaking those thrusts to ground. What I'm thinking of instead is this: I'm still coming offline, but I'm breaking those thrusts quite high, okay? Because 9 times out of 10, they're going to be high thrusts. And if they're a low thrust, as I've said, you'll just counter thrust and you'll probably hit them. So I'm breaking quite high, okay? I'm still coming offline, I'm still doing the fendente type action, okay? But what that's basically doing is leaving the sword quite high so I can slip into posta longer or whatever to carry on my fight, okay? So I'm off, breaking the thrust, and I'm then opening up their centre line. We're also told about the covers from Finestra. Again, those are pretty self-explanatory. The easiest way to think about covers initially is just to form covers in terms of other posta. So from here, it's incredibly easy for me just to slip out into a frontale over the lead leg. Okay. If with a step, I can also maintain frontale over the right leg if I come forward with it. Because my weight is off the front foot, I've got that foot there. I've got that foot there with no weight on it, which means I can bring it offline very, very quickly. Shrapnel falling down. Because the weight is off the front foot, I can place that foot offline very, very easily. Okay, so and this is particularly useful if I want to cover into posta breve, for example, as well. So I can come offline in either direction, but I can come down into a posta breve type position should I need it. That's particularly useful against people who are thrusting and going offline to their right, okay? Because if they thrust low and go offline to their right, trigonometry starts to fail me a little bit, okay? Also, they might have the speed. If they're coming from a low posta, okay, or certainly from this side, and they're thrusting to their right like this, they might have the speed advantage because I am effectively wide spacing my weapon, okay? So there are instances, lots of instances where my lower quadrant is threatened by someone who wants to move offline to their right, to my left. Posta breve becomes my go-to action, okay? So I'm coming offline and I'm basically just snapping down into posta breve to try and take up the centre line, okay? So we're here, no weight on this, so it's a nice quick transition. We're off, we're down, and I've got the centre line open. The other element of this posta is, as I say, we're told about deception, aren't we? So as an offensive posta, the idea of this, again, go back to the instabile element, is that I'm moving around, you know, I'm moving around and coming offline. I'm basically looking for openings, you know, and don't get me wrong, I'm not saying that just because my point can be put aside, I'm not going to be thrusting with it. If I do thrust, yeah, and I hit something, then that's great. I'm just not relying on the fact that I'm going to land with that first strike. In terms of attacking from Finestra, well, the obvious one is obviously all those thrusts that we have of those various different angles, okay? Fury gives us 5 different types of thrust. The other thing as well is I can cut from here quite effectively as well. So I won't step for the moment, but obviously there's my fendente. I want to try and keep in that principle of leading with the weapon. So you'll notice what I do is I untangle it and then I come forward with my body, okay? And if I was to add a step onto that as well, I'm untangling and so the front foot is tied in with the untangle and then the step comes in behind the weapon, okay? So that's my fendente. In terms of mezzano, well, it's a bit of an awkward one from here, but it's absolutely still on, okay? So without a step first, I'll just do a smaller crease. I'm just going to turn it like this, okay? Now, a mezzano like this is going to be predominantly a clearing action rather than an attacking action. Because if I take all of this time to send that in, my opponent is going to have lots of time to do stuff. So quite often, I'll employ a mezzano against, say for example, someone who's occupying the centre line and very, very close. Let's say they're in a posta longa type position, yeah, and I'm leaning right back. I will just untangle and I'll just mezzano at their posta longa type position, okay, to then give me the centre line as well. Satani from here is obviously quite difficult with false edge, but with true edge, it's absolutely on as an option. I can't think of many instances where you'd want to use a Satani except to transition from one side to the other with this posta. So coming like this from one side to the other with that posta. You can get your fendente from the other side too, but it starts to get incredibly clunky and it's a single timed action. Yeah, you're not going to be stepping with that. It's going to be the slowest, most clunky attack in the world. That being said, there are instances where you can come behind the opponent's weapon with an action like that, okay, if they're much too close to you. It's a very useful action to have in your head. So if they are attacking or in a posture up on their high right, okay, there are instances where I can come across my body and just throw in a quick single timed fendente. Mezzani from that side is almost irrelevant, and for obvious reasons, Satani from that side from here is obviously just not going to be something that you're going to really try and do. That being said, there is the option for a kind of hybrid sort of baby Satani type action, okay, where if you're messing around trying to place your thrust and the opponent is trying to occupy the center line, then obviously you can move your point around, yeah, to try and maintain control of the center line. So there are kind of little Satanis, but you can't really call it a proper colpi. So that's a bit of a whistle stop of Finestra. At the end of the day's filming, so it's probably a bit rushed, and I'm sure there's lots more to add, but I hope that answers those questions I was getting about using this posta. Again, without a partner during lockdown, it's obviously super hard to show some examples of entering plays from that position, but do let me know if this didn't answer your question.